What is the best age to retire? It's a question many of us will wrestle with. I know I did. On one hand, we have our vision of the perfect retirement, the one we dream of, the one we work so hard for. On the other hand, we have the reality checks, worries about our savings, concerns about financial stability. What happens if we outlive our money? These are fears that can stop us in our tracks. And all the while, the sands of time are slipping through that hourglass. And each grain reminds us that the longer we wait to step into that vision, the less time we'll have to enjoy it. But here's the truth. There is a path forward. We don't have to be stuck in this tug of war between our dreams and our doubts. So today we're going to take control of our future and take a hard look at the timing of retirement. First, we're going to look at the ages that people choose to retire, are planning to retire, and actually retire. We're going to look at what some of the doubts are that hold us back. And most important, at the end, we're going to discuss some ways that we can reshape our approach to retirement so that we can feel empowered to move forward. Hi, everyone. I'm John. I'm 61 years old. And after 39 years in the corporate world, I took that step to retire. I can't say I have all the answers. I'm definitely in a journey here, and that's what this channel is about. Maybe there's things I didn't think about. Maybe there's other ways to look at this, and maybe there's some options that you feel or you explored that have really helped. So let's get started. So now we're going to look at a few ages, and I'm not going to look at these in chronological order. These are numbers that pop up. There's no magic about the specific numbers, but they are sort of in our consciousness as ages that people think of when they retire. So here we go. So the first is 65. Why does this number pop up a lot, 65? Well, because it was the full retirement age when Social Security was first enacted back in the 1930s. What's interesting about that is, so at the time when Social Security set this age, life expectancy in the United States was actually 64 years old. Now, clearly a lot of things have changed. Firstly, we're living longer. So 64 is no longer our life expectancy. That number is actually 73 for men, 79 for women. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what that means, but those are the numbers now. And with that, also the full retirement age has changed to our next number. So that brings us to 67. So 67 is now the full retirement age. So this is according to Social Security. So if you were born after the year 1960, it's not until the age of 67 that you're considered full retirement. So if you're born before 1960, again, it started at 65, but it's been inching up to this. Anyone born after 1960, like myself and folks of my generation, well, it's 67. And a few things happen in Social Security at this age. So again, it's the full retirement. So this isn't, interestingly enough, the maximum benefit you can collect, but it's considered the age of the full benefit. And anything before is going to be less, and anything that after up to a limit is going to increase. And it's about 8% a year. The other thing that happens at 67 is if you work, so if you decide that you're going to retire earlier than this age, and you think you're going to supplement that with a part-time job or some other source of income from work, well, there's a limit on how much you can earn and still collect your full benefit. So that limit right now is $23,400 a year. And if you go over that, Social Security starts to look at taking back part of your benefit. And for now, this is it. This is the maximum age. It doesn't continue to increase. However, if you follow the news, there's a lot of talk. I mean, we all know Social Security as a program is going to hit some challenges over the next decade or so. More people collecting than are paying in. And that's the aging population. So we're going to keep an eye on this number. It's not set to change right now, but as the population gets older, I'm convinced, I don't know about you, but this is going to change. There's going to be something happen here, and we'll see what it is. Let's just look at this range again for just a little bit, 65 to 67. Here's the percentages of when people actually retire in this range. At 65, 13.1% of the population decides to retire at 65. Then the next year is actually a pretty big jump for folks who work past 65. 66 is a big leap, all the way up to 24.7% of the population will retire at that age. And lastly, 67, about 4.1%. So when you put that all together, it looks like 41.9% of the population retires somewhere in this range from 65 to 67. Okay, so 62. So 62 is the age, and as I said before, this is the youngest age at which you could collect Social Security. So for this discussion, we're going to consider anybody who retires younger than 62 to be really early retirement. And again, according to Social Security, if you retire in that range from 62 to 67, you're retiring early. You're not getting your full benefit, and there's a limit on how much you can work and still collect Social Security. For those younger than this, you're not eligible for Social Security yet. So let's take a look at this chart. So what we have here is the range of ages from 50 all the way up to 80, and it shows the cumulative percentage of people who are actually retired at that age. So a couple of things pop out of this chart. One is clearly by the time we're in our late 70s, most of us are retired. So again, we hear a few stories about people who work beyond 80 and into 90. It's rare, right? So at this point, 99% of the population is retired. And you can see that it climbs pretty steadily from 50 to 62. 62 is actually the current mean retirement age. So that means it's the midpoint. Let's think about this. So we talked about before, most people believe or are expecting to retire at 65 or later right now. But in reality, more than half the population is retired by the time they're 62. So that must be a good thing, right? People are retiring earlier than expected. Maybe not so much. Let's take a look. In reality, 58% of the people who retire before the age of 62 have done so for unforeseen circumstances, which means they didn't plan for it and they didn't really want it. 46% of early retirees did so for health reasons. So chronic illness, disabilities, serious illness, other challenges physically with health, that's 46% of these people who retire early. Another is employment issues. And this is one that is really feeling like it's become more prevalent. This is where changes in our companies, changes in jobs, people are being let go. Companies are reorganizing. Dramatic changes are happening in the job, and it's leaving older workers behind or having them leave. And it's forced. So this is, you hear about forced retirement. That's this. In some cases, people are outright let go. Sometimes they're offered packages. And then the last group is family responsibilities. 20% of the people who retire early do so because a family member, a parent, a spouse, a child, some member of their family needed care, and they were the only ones that could do so. So when you put this together, 58% of people, while that number 62 looks good as early retirement, this is what's baked into it. So what about the people who do choose to retire early? Interestingly, only 21% of retirees who fall into this category of retiring early because they wanted to. So before 62, they wanted to retire. 21% are doing so because they have reached financial independence. So these are the people, congratulations, they hit their numbers, and we hear about the financial independence, retire early movement. Great for them. So again, out of the 42% who choose to retire early, 21% are doing so because of financial independence. It's not a big number. It's admirable when it happens, and more power to them. But just understand, when we look at all of their circumstances, this isn't a lot of people. And then the other are lifestyle choices. These are folks that maybe didn't hit the financial independence number, but at younger than 62, they made some decisions and they were able to look at lifestyle changes. That's your group. From those who are retiring early because they have to, 58%, and those who are retiring early because they chose to and planned to, 42%. So that leads us to the next part of the conversation. So we've looked at this age range and where people fall in terms of what they're planning, what actually happens, and who's still working and who's not. Let's just take a quick look at another part of this, life expectancy. Right now, life expectancy for men is 73, and for women, it's 79. But I just want to point out, just keep in mind, this is an average. So it doesn't necessarily mean that most people die at 73 or 79. In fact, that's not true at all. So that leads to the next number, which is called the modal age of death. If you take all of those ages of mortality, all of those ages of death, and you laid them all out in a graph, you'd see that most people die between the age of 85 and 89. I just want to point out that the percent of people that actually live to be 100 right now is actually less than 1% of the population. That's pretty small odds. And again, it's happening more, well, because honestly, there's a big population of people who are living longer, but it's still not a big chunk of the population. We can't expect that that's how long we're going to live. And then certainly it's not reasonable to expect that for most of us, our 90s to 100 are going to be the best years of our retirement. So that's something to keep in mind. So I want to take a quick look at how long people actually have when they retire. How much longer do they live after retirement? So if you look at the table, you can see that people who retire at 62 on average have 22 years. And then it goes down from there. So people who retire at 65 on average live another 18 years, and people who retire at 70 on average live another 13 years. I think one of the things that I think about when I look at this table is, yes, so it makes sense that 62, 65, 70, those numbers are going down. And why? Because that end date isn't changing. So it's not like if you work longer, you're going to live longer. I think there's a myth there that people think that, but I think this table says otherwise. Talk about longevity and how long you live, but what about how many healthy active years do we have? This is commonly referred to as our health span. In our 60s and 70s, that's when a lot of health problems start. So this accounts for, again, when we looked at that chart of why people are retiring younger than the age of 62 or some of those earlier retirements, a lot of it's health related. And it's the age of chronic diseases and other severe illnesses popping up: cardiovascular disease, strokes, cancers, diabetes, other challenges. For those in their 60s, this is an age where a lot of that starts to come up. And so it greatly impacts not only our ability to enjoy, to live beyond our retirement, but to enjoy it. So let's look at some of the reasons, some of those weights that, as I described before, are keeping us back. They're pulling us away from our vision. Starting with number one, insufficient savings. Do I have enough money to retire? And even if I think I have enough, I'm afraid I'm going to outlive my savings. 20% of Americans over the age of 50 have zero retirement savings. And even for people who have saved, well, 61% worry that it's not enough. The next is inflation. These recent spikes in inflation, I believe, and for me, as part of the consideration, it definitely has you thinking about when is the right time to retire. Market fluctuations. These last 15 to 17 years in the markets have been one of growth. And a lot of people, I know people who have made choices to retire early and who have done really well because the markets have been, moving up pretty steadily. Yeah, we see drops here and there, and we had another one the other day, but honestly, it's been a good run. But we know that doesn't happen forever. And I think for a lot of us that are this age, at 61, so people I know, friends, colleagues who are in this range from 55 to 65, we remember well the Great Recession. In 2007 to 2009, that's not that long ago. So 15 years ago, I knew colleagues, friends, family who were planning to retire and they were getting close. And when that hit, when that market crash happened and that downward turn, what it did to 401ks and retirement savings was devastating. People postponed retirement for several years just because of the material impact they could see in their savings accounts. People who had retired wound up returning to work to cover the losses. Knowing that, remembering that, I think it puts a lot of us this age in that question of, even if we have a lot of savings and we've hit the marks that we were targeting, we know this can turn very quickly. So now I just want to make a quick comment on how hard these choices are. There's a lot to weigh here. And I wouldn't want to give anyone the impression that this is just some equation where you look at how long you might live, what the options are, and that you can make this choice. That is not the case at all. These are tough choices. I've personally known people who did everything right. They worked hard. They saved for retirement. They had plans. They knew where they were going, and things did not work out. They either retired and then within a few years had a serious illness, or in the worst cases, passed away. I've known colleagues, friends, family, and people I cared about who had this happen. In some instances, I've known people who retired and shortly after were diagnosed with very severe illnesses, and it changed the quality and the enjoyment of the retirement dramatically. Sadly, I've also known people who were getting close to retirement, who were in their 60s and kept going, and sadly passed away before they even made it. I also think beyond the tragedy of the individual stories, there's this growing sense that what's going on right now isn't sustainable. The notion that retirement ages are going to keep going up, well, unless there's dramatic changes in healthcare and science that can guarantee improvements in the quality of our life later, we're really looking at some challenges ahead. An aging workforce. Again, I've talked about, do we think that companies are going to sustain a workforce that's in their 70s in all jobs? Probably not. More and more people working later, trying to make this work. It's again, something is going to change. Something is got to happen. So that's what I want to look at next. So the first is semi-retirement. I looked at this and I actually did this for a little bit. So even though I'm not at retirement age yet, the last few years before I retired, I started to do more contract work. I was being hired on an hourly basis by companies in work similar to what I had done in my corporate life. A lot of the work that was available was full-time, which would be the classic 40 hours a week. But I specifically looked for and found work that was a fraction of that. So in some assignments, I was working 20 hours a week. And that was good. It was a form of easing into retirement. It gave me a chance to spend a couple of years basically cutting back on the hours I was spending in the corporate environment and starting to test drive and pursue some of the things that I thought I might do in retirement. And it was a good transition. So this is one that I looked at, I tried for a while. If you can find freelance contract work that fits this category, this is definitely an option. And more people are exploring this every day. So the next is career changes. So again, even if people can't or don't want to do part-time, an outright career change, a dramatic shift from the type of work they're doing to something more enjoyable that they can still make a living at. For me, I looked at and I got a certificate in to become a personal trainer. I had considered leaving my corporate job and starting a whole second career working in fitness centers or doing that type of work. The notion that you have to work, but changing that to working in an environment and on something you feel strongly about and that you'll enjoy, and just the change can make it exciting. This is happening more and will continue. So the next is what we'll call the creative options. And for me, this was the one that was most exciting. So I had tried the part-time for a while. I didn't want to keep working in the industry, the type of career I had. I thought about an alternative career, but it was still working for someone. I wanted to work for me. Like, the freedom really mattered to me, and this is what I chose. There's ways now to make money that didn't exist before. So online businesses, YouTube channels, people starting cottage businesses. This is thinking about yourself as a business and generating revenue as opposed to working for someone. Other people might, consider consulting in completely different ways than they did before. I've known people, what are some of the examples? I know someone who wrote their first books after they retired. And I think right now, this is probably one of the bigger growing segments. We're going to see more and more people, seniors, who are exploring the types of creative incomes that we traditionally thought of as for younger people. The most important thing, whatever you decide, make sure it's tailored for you. You know yourself, you know what you're about, you know what drives you. Make this decision starting with what you want. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the like button. I'd love to hear your comments. Again, these were my thoughts, and I think hearing from you is just going to make this so much more interesting and powerful for everyone watching. I'm going to put this video in a playlist. I've got some more that are coming out. I'm going to look deeper at planning and creating the vision. I'm going to look at some of the alternatives a little closer. I'm going to share some of my progress around what's happening here on this channel on YouTube for me and what that looks like for people who are interested. Thank you for joining. We'll see you again soon. Take care.